Alrighty, so hello everyone. Welcome back to Case 3. So we're really happy that you guys could join us today. This is the start of the new challenge. I shouldn't say Case 3, it's actually Challenge 3. We have another Tech Under 20 event that's Tech Under 20 cases, so you guys should definitely join. But because of the conflict in the names, we are changing from case to challenge. So it's going to be challenges from now onwards. So today's agenda is basically going to be introducing challenge 3. We're going to jump right into the panelist discussion and then quickly introduce the project in the very end. Awesome. So what is challenge 3 all about? Challenge 3 is about acquiring the tools to become an expert within an industry. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be an expert in an industry? Well, we live in a highly interconnected world where, because of those highly interconnected connections and, people are dependent on those connections to, run their businesses, get from a place to place and really carry out their day-to-day activities. In a world where we're highly efficient, right? There's very few problems that are out there that are really worth solving. And because we have so many different industries that work in tandem to really, help the earth move and help us, live the lives we want to live, it's really important to understand how these connections operate and understand how they work to, move society and in general, how these businesses operate to create an impact. Now, when we want you to become experts in an industry, we're really talking about understanding to the fullest extent possible of what the problems are out there and how they, match with what your industry is trying to do. If we look at this pyramid on the screen, research and understanding the problem is very foundational to a company's values or a company in general, according to many entrepreneurs. Having a good understanding of what an industry is all about lays a foundation for, the later parts of running a business, your ability to solve a problem, and in general, creating the solution. Coming back to that research, if your research is not good, creating the solution is not going to be that easy either. Now, in this case, as I mentioned, we'll be focusing on, how to conduct really good research and how to understand the crux of different problems that are out there. Now, the goal for challenge 3 is, as I said, to understand the connections that exist, find out how and why the industry moves in a certain way and how it reacts to different events. And the second thing is we want to learn from people in an industry and help you build connections with, those respective people. Then we want you to be able to ask good questions and finally become an expert and very knowledgeable of that industry itself. Now, the plan for this challenge is to learn from panelists that we have today. We have Sheila and Heidi, and then that's going to be today. And then next week, we're going to learn about how to conduct good research. And as I mentioned, how to go through a good outreach framework. And finally, we're going to you guys are going to create and present a map that shows all the different connections between your industry and in general, the problems that exist and how the industry works. So we ourselves can get an understanding of how aware you are of this industry. I said industry, connections, and understanding a lot. I'm so sorry, but please bear with me. So without further ado, that is enough of me talking. We'll jump straight into our wonderful speakers today. Panelists, actually, sorry. So we got Heidi from Detonate, which is a really cool marketing company based in Markham. And then we got Sheila, who works at Crowdmark. They both recently joined their current companies, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, let's get right to it. So, hey, Sheila, and hey, Heidi. I was about to get the names mixed up, so sorry. Do you guys want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Sheila, would you like to go first?
Sure. So hi, I'm Sheila. So a little bit about my background. I went to Western University. I worked in admissions and recruitment for a couple of years. Following that, I worked at Sales Talent Agency where I had a 7-year career, including launching the Great Canadian Sales Competition. I don't know if any students here have ever participated or heard of it, but that is a that is an initiative that I ran from the ground up, and gave me exposure to a lot of different post-secondary schools, which felt like a very natural move for me personally to move into the ed tech space. So I am brand new at Crowdmark. I've been there for a month, but I am their director of operations. Sam, actually, who's leading this seminar and doing a really lovely job, by the way, told me that he just used Crowdmark for one of his engineering assessments. So, Crowdmark is a collaborative assessment tool, and it's designed to give students really enriched feedback with your assignments, while not also compromising the administrative work that actually takes to do that from the assessment, from an actual grading perspective. So instructors that use the Crowdmark platform typically are able to grade 3 times faster, and us moving into a more virtual landscape has been huge in terms of the demand that people want to be using Crowdmark. So I'm going to be there to help with a number of different things, but that is my new journey at Crowdmark.
Awesome. Congratulations, Sheila.
Thanks.
And Heidi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm a recent graduate from McMaster University. I did a Bachelor of Commerce there and a minor in econ. So still pretty fresh in the kind of student realm. I still, hold a lot of that. The broke student mentality is still how I operate, even though I've been out of school for almost 2 years now. But I have, had the opportunity to have a number of different internships in different industries. So I have a bit of experience from like tech and pharma, finance, like the legal space as well. And since I've been a graduate, I have had the opportunity to work in wealth management at the Bank of Montreal, Spiffy, which is a training app that started in the hospitality space and then moved to kind of the legal cannabis space. And now I work at Detonate as a junior account exec, really trying to leverage the one-to-one platform, which is kind of a centralization tool that's supposed to connect retailers and brands, again, in the legal cannabis space. So lots of interesting things I've been able to learn since, I'm still pretty fresh out of being a student, but I am still very young and I'm learning how to network and learning the kind of professional landscape, as it were. So I'm excited to be here and learn and share.
Awesome. So thank you both. And once again, congratulations, Heidi, on your graduation and your current role. That's awesome. Brilliant. So we'll go straight into our first question. So what is, and we can start with you, Heidi. What is the culture of your current organization that you work in?
That's a great question. I think the culture in this org is actually one of the main reasons I took the role. So, speaking of networking, I had a relationship with the vice president of sales from my previous company. And a big reason why I wanted to join Detonate was because I learned that everyone in this company has really well-defined roles, comes from a diverse background, age, life experience, stage of life, gender, all of that's really important to me. So you ask about culture and something I probably should have said in my intro is I am fanatical about good leadership, about people, about emotional intelligence and culture in general in organizations, passionate about women and BIPOC representation in organizations. It's what I'd like to advocate for throughout my career as a lawyer, hopefully in the future as well. So Detonate exemplifies that. I think it's a really great, group of 15 to 20 people. It's still a pretty small firm, but it's been around in the space for, 10 or so years. And I think in a lot of times especially when you enter kind of like the marketing and design, like space of industries, there's so many companies out there and it becomes really hard to kind of stand out. So there's not really one way to summarize what the culture is, except just like very diverse and very strong and something I'm excited that I'm a part of. It's been a really good, first couple of weeks getting to learn everyone.
For sure. And Sheila, you can just go for it.
For sure. So again, I'm been at Crowdmark for a hot second, but I can tell you a little bit more about why I chose to work there, and I am finding that my speculations are being very validated the longer that I'm there. But the core values at Crowdmark are integrity, collaboration, and community. So that goes in basically everything we do. Our CEO, Michelle Cares, is a really well thought out, decorated in the education space, smart, collaborative, and very customer centric leader. And all of that, when you, echoing Heidi's point, when you have strong leadership, that trickles down within an organization. So what I'm finding is that, especially with a SaaS product, software as a service, is there's always things that can be done. There's always improvements. There's always things that you're chasing, and having really defined leadership to say, okay, what is a priority? What do we absolutely need to fix right away? And making sure that we're being really thoughtful in our engagement to all of our stakeholders, whether they're students or instructors. This is a really stressful time for instructors and students both. I'm sure I don't have to tell this audience that, but this is a huge adjustment. So that customer-centric attitude and being extremely empathetic, very supportive, is really the cornerstone of how we operate and why we have people that come back. So, you know, and in one word, I find that our approach is extremely genuine, really respectful with each other. Again, you're never going to get 100% alignment on every idea, but I think finding an organization that's really receptive to hearing those ideas and really analytical about how you approach those. Again, you can't do a million things at once. So being really thoughtful on what ideas that you capitalize on and which ones you put to the side, that is really powerful. But overall, my experience thus far has been really great. And I think what they do is both important, and they're uniquely qualified to lead this charge.
Awesome. So that's really cool to know about CrowdMark. Me being a user, I only see the grading software.
I know, I'm like sweating a little bit. I'm like, oh God, I hope nobody on this call has had like a dreadful experience. If you have, sidebar me, and I would really welcome the opportunity to salvage whatever experience you had. But overall, it feels like the experience is overall a positive one. And Sam, whether you were being nice or not, that's kind of what you echoed.
No. I'm being totally honest. I think my only bad experience was when I saw my mark the other day, but you know what? Let's not even go towards that.
You have no bearing on that.
No. That's all. I'm just kidding around. But so yeah, thank you for your answers there. So we can go on to the next question, which is, and we can start with you again, Sheila. You know, how do corporations like CrowdMark or even Detonate, take ideas or problems and build them out into tangible solutions? Like, what is that workflow like?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so your question is how to take ideas and scale them.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So I think that that diagram that you shared early on was a really powerful one. I think the first thing that you have to recognize whenever you're implementing a new idea is, what is the value prop? And a value proposition is going to do one of two things. It's either going to fix an existing problem, or it's going to improve an already good thing. So the first thing has to be, okay, what is the so what factor behind what it is that we're looking to do? That second layer has to be, okay, what proof do we have that this is an actual problem, or that improving this particular situation is going to be beneficial? And then that third layer has to be, why are we uniquely qualified to solve that problem? Right? So you have these three layers that I think are important to consider. And part of that value prop work really does come, in my experience, in doing good research. There's a lot under your nose. I even as a job seeker, I found this. I was at the same company for 7 years. I was not going to just pick the first opportunity that came about. So a lot of intense research came into landing where I'm at. So even platforms like LinkedIn, to understand who are the players in the space. Is anybody actually tackling this problem already? And if so, why do we think that we can do it better? So really intensive research. And that also can, conversations can be extremely beneficial. I find very few people necessarily always get up the nerve to just ask for a conversation, but oftentimes that's when you can really round out a perspective, is hear from an expert in the industry to tell you what's going on, what pain points they're experiencing, to invite, okay, am I the best person that can solve this problem? And if so, what does that solution look like? I hope that answers your question.
No, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And thanks for letting it back to that pyramid I made really quick. What about you, Heidi?
I think Sheila summarized the leadership aspect of the entire like ideation to execution process perfectly. Like I was taking notes, and those are the exact questions that I see leadership asking in any org that I've kind of been able to see, ideas start as seeds and be pulled out to get realized. I think where I would just add to it from my sales kind of experience is understanding the customer, because I think a huge element of everything, Sheila has talked about lays the foundation, and then it becomes up to your organization across every level. And that's where really having accountable leadership that's transparent and that preaches vision and makes sure that everyone has defined roles and is empowered, feels heard, and knows exactly how to execute on that idea does it, right? And so kind of where I like, if you think about an organization that, let's say organization X has done the ideation process. They've thought about, what the value prop is. They understand if they're solving a challenge or if they're improving something, and they know what the market looks like. Really kind of where sales or where I would come in is to understand the customer. So there's a couple of things that I think of when I think about the customer. One is just really understanding them and listening. When I first came into sales, which again was only about a year and a half ago, I had, this really traditional idea about what a sales rep looks like. And it was essentially a mirror image of like, a 90s pharma rep or someone from Wolf of Wall Street or Love and Other Drugs. It was not a very inviting, I guess, idea of what I thought the role is. But as I've learned more about this career and gotten to, work on my skill set, I realized it's a lot more about listening and asking questions. And so if you understand your customer, if you understand the landscape, and I wrote down a couple questions, if you look at what they're doing today and understand why it's not working, then you're in a better position to execute your idea and have it actually be valuable for them, right? Like all of the variables can line up for your organization. And in the boardroom, you can have the perfect vision of how this idea is going to solve a challenge in the market. But if you don't understand the customer you're selling it to, it's not going to work, right? And one thing, I'm a really, really big follower of David Priemer's work. If any of you guys are, even interested remotely in sales, I would recommend Sell the Way You Buy. It's probably one of the most life-changing books I've read. And one really cool thing that he talks about is just the idea of being a young person and having like experience asymmetry, where you're selling to older people and you don't necessarily feel like you're the best person or the most qualified to do so. I think where I land on that spectrum is, again, understanding the customer, speaking with conviction, and being, the most knowledgeable person in the area of, what I'm executing. And kind of a really last puzzle of the piece is when you actually build a relationship with your customer that's rooted in helping them solve or improve what they're doing, you have to help them drive behavior change. But that starts with making them believe in what you're doing. So if that idea becomes a project or a new pillar of your business or some sort of even a new product or service or feature in your software, you have to drive behavior change by understanding your customer. So that's what I would always bring it back to. And it becomes the role of salespeople to do the listening and do the hard work to build that relationship. It's something I'm still really learning, but as you go through your sales career and as I, go through mine and learn from, more senior people and implement different strategies, I think, corporation can have a tangible solution when it takes everything into account. It's kind of like looking at, the triple P's: people, planet, profit. So yeah, that would be my take on it.
That was really in depth from what you both. Yeah, I think a very powerful takeaway is that managing your business is really just, getting together a group of people together and really understanding how you could leverage each other's collective strengths to solve a specific problem, and really taking that to advantage. So yeah, that I definitely think that was very insightful.
You nailed it. We should work for you, Sam.
Oh my God, thank you. And then the next question I have, and Heidi, you could start off with this, is what do you think is one thing that is important to solving a problem effectively, and why? I think you touched on this earlier, but may not be a bad idea to touch it again.
So your question is, what's the most important thing to solving a problem?
Exactly.
To be honest, probably knowing what the problem is. I think a lot of times, like the industry that I'm working in right now is really emerging. So it's a really fragmented industry. So I can speak from my experience, and there are probably like on any given minute, like 12 or 13 huge problems that are plaguing retailers, brands, companies like us in the middle that are just trying to help both sides. And I think if a business tries to do 12 things right, they will probably only do 2 of those things so. I think if you really understand what the most important problem is, and it kind of goes back to storyboarding, like you guys will see, I have a big, I have like a whole section of whiteboards and chalkboards. What I tend to do is I tend to be very visual with my kind of ideation process. So if I look at a problem, it actually helps to really understand if that problem is just a symptom or an actual root cause of what's happening. Because a lot of times businesses, like if you take a restaurant, for example, they might have turnover as a huge problem in their business, or they might have like lost inventory if it's a retail business. But I think if you pull it back to what the actual causes of turnover are and maybe why, inventory is a big problem in your business, you might actually learn that there's a completely different set of issues that you have to address. So if you're an organization and I think you're trying to approach, solving a number of different challenges, I think it requires a couple different elements, which, Sheila will comment on better than I would, which is laser focus, which is accountability and transparency from leadership. It's, definition and structure in an organization. It's, having the right set of processes and enablement and tools for your team to succeed and address that problem. But the way that I would look at it would just be as a student, right? Like, look at the problem, figure out what's actually happening, and then fix it, right? You wouldn't fix the engine of a car before, you checked everything else or figured out if it's a transmission or something else. So I don't know why I used a car metaphor here. I don't know anything about cars, but that's how I would approach it.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. And Sheila, you can go for it.
I think that's a solid response. I could not agree more with the first component, that you have to understand, first of all, is this even a problem? Because sometimes there's a lot of fake objections to a problem, and what you're actually addressing is something completely different. And you can only get to that when you ask good, thoughtful questions. So first of all, what is the real problem? What are the fake objections I need to get past to really get a clear idea of what I'm tackling? Once you are able to do that, I love what Heidi was talking about with salespeople, because studies show that introverts perform better as salespeople for the simple fact they listen better. So by asking really thoughtful questions and really marinating yourself with those responses enables you to start saying, okay, what is the actual problem here? How do I go back? And then once you're ready to go into that creation stage, I have a personal philosophy that if you assign more than one person to a particular task, you can almost always assume it will not get done. I just do. So it is a bystander effect to the highest degree. So accountability goes really deep. You can have multiple people on a particular project, but when it comes time to say, okay, who is involved, who is responsible to bring in the money for this particular project, who is responsible for sales, one person should be in charge of making that happen. It doesn't mean that one person is doing it on their own. It means that one person is, the head of that one component to that problem. So when it comes time to actually move, accountability is incredibly helpful. Realistic timelines are really helpful. Project management is one of my focuses, and I think that's really, really important to really map things out, to say what is every single component that's going to need to get done to get this done. What is the lag time between, I'm getting a little technical, but what is the lag time between each of those different components? And make sure that you have a clear directive, not just for yourself and to make sure that you're managing your expectations to your team, but your external stakeholders as well. There's nothing that will make people lose confidence in you quicker than you saying that you're going to deliver on a solution and it ends up taking 3 times longer for you to fix. Does that help answer your question? I'm going to keep asking that because I want to make sure that I'm actually answering your question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does put a good perspective to it. Yeah, our goal from this session is to see what your perspective is like on these specific questions. So it's very good that you're sharing your honest opinion. And you both mentioned, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that I think in my experience, a lot of people move into that project planning phase a little too quickly. If you actually look at a project management plan, that first step, that first vital step is actually getting all of your stakeholders that you need involved, making sure that you have a good business case, making estimations so that when you are presenting it forward and let's say there's a cost, it's like, okay, is this worth it? Or do we actually want to, and a lot of projects don't actually move past that phase because when you've done proper research, it gives you a clearer perspective as to whether or not to move on. So I think if anything should come out of what Heidi and I just said, determining, is this actually a problem? Should be one of the more time consuming steps without it being completely, what's the word? Paralyze and cure movement. There is such thing as analysis paralysis, like know when to move on, and know when to get moving. But that analysis is really important. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Like I think, especially for I think high achievers, it's really hard to take or make decisions when you feel like you're not perfect. You know what I mean? So it's definitely a change in mindset because, growing up in school, it's like you're always taught to, think almost 100% and, make accurate decisions. But it's interesting to see how people stray away from that as you grow older. And, you both mentioned,
Sorry
yeah,
about
go for
that,
it.
but I think something that happens, like, and I'm still pretty young, but I think what I've seen happen a lot in a couple different organizations is like the exact thing Sheila was talking about is, you move quickly, I think sometimes to the execution phase before actually understanding all the different variables. And I think that happens in a lot of cases with, more legacy or, corporations and organizations that aren't as agile or flexible to understanding that projects need to be kind of evaluated on their own basis. I think a lot of people suffer from confirmation bias or asking a question, then trying to retrofit the data or the numbers to fit that assumption. And I think that's really where big initiatives go wrong. If you even think about like huge organizations that have tried to like move their business models and internationally, you think of Tim Hortons, Target, Nordstrom, like a lot of times organizations fail like that because they don't fully understand the market that they're walking into. If you take that to a much smaller like microcosm, it could be, CrowdMark starting a new initiative or Detonate offering something new to our customers. Every level of an organization needs to be well aligned before moving forward. And I think that really, really requires a lot of patience. And it kind of you run the risk of, getting to the place where you're just, walking through a lot of red tape and it becomes analysis paralysis. But I think if an organization has kind of like really well set boundaries or I guess parameters to go about problem solving and ideation, then I think it's poised or in a better position to kind of solve those challenges.
That definitely does put an interesting perspective on it. And you both mentioned like, asking good questions. So, the question is like, how do you ask your clients good questions and understand what you can do to solve their problems?
Do you want me to
go first?
Yeah, go for it.
As Heidi was talking, I remembered this saying that my grandfather used to say, it's measure twice, cut once. And I think it's really appropriate when you're actually talking about building something. Anytime that I've rushed that planning process, I always end up doing it again. Like 100% of the time, I can tell you that. Okay, so going back to
listen to that when I cut the wallpaper for this. I missed a tiny little part and I had to like cut a little square. If I just measured better.
Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
Okay, so asking good questions. I think that it's a really good question. The first thing that I would say is do your on-set research. I'm very fascinated, and this is more coming from a recruitment perspective. I used to recruit across literally every industry. I genuinely cannot think of an industry that I haven't touched from a recruitment perspective. And I am fascinated by people that come onto calls and ask questions that are just directly on the website. So that would be my first very simple piece of feedback, is that if you've got somebody on the phone and you're looking to learn more, ask very thoughtful questions. And that doesn't mean that you're an expert. You'll hear me say this all the time, is you clearly know this better than me, and this may be a silly question, but so nobody is suggesting that you know everything, but do your research to build on existing data. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is I would look at a platform critically. No matter what it is that you're looking at, don't look at it to say, okay, I want to absorb and I want to memorize. Actually look at it with a critical eye to say, I wonder why they do this. And that's really interesting, because I talked to Bob last week and he said that we should do X, Y, and Z. I'm wondering why they're doing it this way. So that critical thinking is going to help you actually build out more thoughtful questions, opposed to let me just learn and memorize stuff across a bunch of different industries. It's also way more fun when you do it that way. And there is no such thing as a stupid question. And what else did I want to say? Yeah, I think we're sitting on a lot of data, and that can be a little bit overwhelming. And no two opinions are going to be the same. It's up to you to have as many conversations and consult with information as out there to form your own opinion. But I constantly find that the conversations that I have with experts in the field, while the answers aren't necessarily identical, do help frame out my own perspective on how I'm going to specifically help or impact that particular industry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would really add to that is like asking layered questions. I think the approach that I take when I'm talking to a prospect in, a first level discovery conversation is having a good understanding of the industry already, what other competitors in the space struggle with. And so I understand the pain already when I walk into a conversation. But if I'm trying to sell someone something, I can't just immediately go, hey, you struggle with this, buy my software. I have to ask a lot of questions to get there, right? So I have to understand first, what does the structure of the organization look like? What does their team look like? How do they make decisions? How do they go about implementing new initiatives in their organization? And then once I kind of have a lot of that, the surface level understanding, then you go to your second level and your third level questions, which are really more like follow-up based, emotional, understanding your buyer on an emotional level kind of based questions. My mentor Shabazz is going to find this really funny, but he talks a lot about this black box, which is something that, salespeople will know from kind of day one. There's always going to be a blind spot of things that you will never know about your customer. And that might be because you just kind of missed one comment here or there to ask a question, or they missed something. And so I think in a lot of cases, the approach that I try to take, and I'm really, really learning on one of my, not resolutions, but one of my things to get better at in the sales world is questioning. And one of the thing that I think of in that same realm is trying to understand when my customer is saying something, what they're not saying, and how to ask a question about it. So again, it really just goes back to really listening to your customer and trying to figure out what they're communicating to you that they might not be aware of, because in a lot of cases, it's possible that they don't even know what their pain is. They might be looking at a different problem, right? You talked about understanding your problem. Maybe they don't even know what their problem is. And your job as a salesperson, at the end of the day, sure, it might just be to sell your product and meet your quota, but I don't think of sales that way. I think of it a lot more as a consultative based role where you're helping someone solve a problem, but you're helping them understand what that problem is too. And so if you're not the best product or service or software, whatever it is, to help them accomplish that goal, it's your job to lead them that way, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to succeed, especially, when you're in my case, in a new industry. So the black box is really what I'll go to, but the goal is to always ask questions by listening and limiting the size of that black box so that your blind spot is always, as small as it can be, so that everyone's really happy in the end. That's where I would say.
No, there's a lot of like invaluable points in there, like that were definitely very powerful. So like when you take all that information then, right, and you want to actually come up with a solution, what is a workflow like to ideate solutions to those customer pain points, and then relay that information when it comes time to actually develop the product towards your product for your product team, sorry. And, Heidi, you could start with this.
Sure. So you're talking about once you have an understanding of your customer's problem, then looking at the solution and how to help them implement that solution, right?
I want to like go a step back. Like, how do you
Or
ideate
communicating
solutions?
a solution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even like ideating, communicating. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think, of course, like, let's say some of the given variables are, that your product is the right solution. So that's like an assumption. Sometimes it's not always given that your product or service or software is the right, answer to someone's problems. But let's say that it is. I'll go back to something I said kind of in the beginning, which a big part of sales, and I'm realizing this now, is helping someone change their behavior. And if you think about how hard it is to get rid of your bad habits, it's like 3 times as hard to get someone else to do something. So if you're trying to communicate a solution to someone, you have to first really make sure that they know that you know what they're struggling with. There's something called a champion in the sales process, which is really appealing to your buyer and understanding what's the most important thing for them that's going to give them a win in their organization, and appealing to that. So a bit of that is, really catering to that person's ego and helping them understand you care about them, so that it's you and them versus, your organizations respectively. But once you've created a champion out of the person that's going to drive your initiative home, once you've limited the size of your black box as much as you can, and you've asked all the right questions, you understand their problem, and they get what their problem is, then it just becomes a matter of aligning in what your solution is going to do for them. So, if I go back to my previous company where, we're a SaaS solution that we're solving a lot of different challenges, from turnover to cost to lots of things. If you try to sell one person on 30 different things that your solution will do, they will probably get really overwhelmed and not accomplish anything. But if you really understand your customer and you know that there's 3 to 4 like really, really key things that are going to help them, drive home the right conversations at the end of the year, plan for their business better, and kind of limit how much they're bleeding on different sides. If they're bleeding money in different areas, then your solution might not even have to do all the other 27 things it does well. It might just have to do those 3 things, right? So the way that I would think of ideating and communicating a solution is knowing how to communicate what the most important things are. What is my customer really going to need at the end of the day? And how can I deliver that to them? How can I make sure during the sales process, they know that they don't have to commit to all 30 amazing benefits of the solution. They just have to know how to do 2 to 3 things right today and then build on it in the future. So that's the approach that I would take, if that answers your question.
Yeah, perfectly.
All right. That was pretty thorough.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I would remember when actually starting to go into that, okay, I'm wanting to solve this problem now, what does that look like, is that you're actually working with multiple stakeholders to get something going. And I'm going to talk about this more from an operations perspective, but I feel like I'm constantly just puppeteering and moving things along. And the 2 branches for me are the customer. Heidi talked a little bit about a champion. That champion from a sales perspective is incredibly important and is going to be your eyes and ears on the ground, so to speak, of what's going on that is going to push something forward. Now, your champion is sometimes going to come forward to say, we need to see this, and list off 30 things. That is not your job. You are never going to make somebody 100% happy. Your job is to say, okay, what is the problem? And does this fix that solution? The same way that as a builder, I can't adhere to every single one of your requests, is the same thing that as a salesperson, I'm not going to feature dump you and tell you 30 things that my thing does, because the only thing that matters is you have a problem and I have a solution. That's where it should land. The details, try not to get sucked into it, because on the flip side, you have your dev team. You have the people that are actually making this vision happen. They have competing priorities. They are completely bogged down with a multitude of requests, which means, going back to that original point, their job is not to make sure that your one customer is 100% happy. Your devs team job is, okay, how do we make this actual problem into something that we can solve? And oftentimes I find that when you're bringing that forward as a case, because of those competing priorities, metrics really do help to make a really good case. What is the scope of this problem? What is the potential opportunity that's out there with us being able to solve that problem? Again, going back to that, what is our value prop? What is our proof? Why are we uniquely able to do it? And why should we make this a priority opposed to the 206 other things that are also on that list? So as much as you're selling to your customer, you are also always making a really strong case internally and making sure that you are always leading with empathy. Again, your champions is pulled in a lot of different directions. Your internal teams are pulled in a lot of directions. Being really mindful of that, really targeted in your approach, and using metrics to really help articulate your problem will make it less personal. I've had X amount of conversations with this many industry leaders. This is what we're hearing the problem is. There is nobody else occupying this space in Canada, as an example. This is the estimated cost for us to do something together. This is the team that we would use to push it out. And based on my, looking at previous work that we've done, I estimate this to be about a 4-week build. Does that sound like something that we can do? So I find that when people just kind of go in with an assumption of, oh, okay, we're going to do it, you're just making people feel like they're not important in that process, and they very much are. And managing expectations, both with internal and external stakeholders, it really does set you up for success.
For sure. Yeah, that's definitely a lot of really good points thrown from that point of view. Yeah, for sure. I don't know what else I could add on to that, but yeah, in terms of like our final question, obviously you guys have had many experiences that are really, really cool and have helped you bring you up to this almost expert level problem solving, standard. What would you suggest, or how can students like us, develop a lens that will help not only detect problems, but also think about possible solutions and really, implement whatever you just brought up in the last, in answering the last several questions?
Heidi, do you want me to go first?
Sure, if you want to. Yeah, I don't mind. If you have an answer ready.
I don't know if I do, but I think what I'll start with is it can be very humbling to never be an expert.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very okay to go into potential questions and potential problems with that humility to say, I may not know what this is, but I'm going to do my very best job to understand as much as I can based on the data that's available. I think that in having a lot of conversations too, you help round out your perspective and that critical thinking that I was talking about earlier. To put this in context, so I used to run this sales competition, and one of the objectives in the second round was somebody creating a 2-minute pitch on behalf of a particular customer. And they had to do a lot of research to say, okay, what do they do? What is the problem? Ask really good questions. And what we always went back to is, think back critically. Everything should lead into that value proposition, that thesis, so to speak, of what you're talking about. And being curious is a really good thing, but being focused in your questions, not getting too bogged down with details. One of the Achilles heels of salespeople, and I think people in general, is people get lost in features. And small details that don't actually serve you. Keep focused on what is the actual problem that I'm looking to solve, and what are the specific questions that I need answered to have a clearer idea of that problem. And 100% is never my target. I don't implement anything that is 100% perfect. I don't feel 100% certain on anything I do. I aim for 80%, because not 100% people are going to be happy. Not 100% knowledge is going to be attained. There's always going to be something so take a little bit of pressure off and aim to have a clear enough the idea that, okay, I was right or I was wrong, or maybe I need to pivot. You're just looking to gather enough data that you can make a recommendation, whether it's you as a person moving forward with something, or you recommending something to another team member. You're just looking to find enough. And then you're constantly building on that. Anyways, that was a bit rambly, so I apologize, but yeah, I do not consider myself an expert. And I think that when you do become an expert, sometimes I like being hungry is what and I think when you're constantly trying to learn and you have that appetite to do so, you ask better and more meaningful questions anyways. So make hunger your priority, not necessarily expertise.
No, that definitely answers the question. Thank you, Sheila. And Heidi.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's a really good answer, Sheila. I think kind of where I land on the spectrum, again, I identify a lot more kind of still as a student because I'm still so, as Sheila said, hungry about learning. I think I know exactly how stressful networking is as a student. It is a nightmare and I still don't necessarily enjoy it. I think what I would say for anybody that's looking to like develop a lens to better understand issues and kind of get to the stage where they can come up with solutions and help communicate them to customers, like I'm 0% there, not at all an expert. But I think what I would say to anybody that's curious to learn is not to be afraid to reach out to leaders in the space to ask them to help you. You might have like a list of questions that you want to get addressed. And obviously forums like this are excellent to hear from different people in the industry and, share ideas within yourselves. But let's say, for example, you're a student that is, studying one of the STEM areas of school, and you want to be a product manager or a project coordinator in the future. That seems like such a stretch kind of a role to approach without knowing anything about how that role functions in an organization, like what role it plays in its larger kind of cross-functional group. So I think if you peel it back and just find people in your area, in the industry that you want to work in that have that role title on LinkedIn, and you just approach them with really kind of an altruistic perspective of just wanting to learn. I think in 99.9% of cases, people are willing to help you, especially when you're a student and you have, the ability to just ask for help for the purpose of just learning. I think when you become, when you leave school and you become like a full-time kind of person, I guess a functioning adult, which I barely am, you can run the risk of like coming across in your networking as insincere if you're just looking to do it out of interest to do a job. But I think the cool thing about being a student is everything you do is just with the intention to learn. So it becomes really hard at the stage that you guys are at. Again, in high school, it's so tough to learn anything more than what is taught to you kind of in your bubble of high school. So, experiential learning opportunities like Tech Under 20 are great to challenge your thinking. Getting involved in different clubs in university, challenging yourself to like make new friends and learn how to talk to people. These are all intangible skills that will help you when you join the workforce. And yeah, truly the only thing that I add to that is just not being afraid to ask people for help. Talk to people. And Dennis is probably, laughing in his room somewhere. Don't be afraid to have lots of coffee chats, even virtually. I love, shooting someone a message that I respect and just saying, hey, I would love to get a 10-minute virtual coffee with you, ask you some questions about career and learn how you've approached XYZ problem. It's an area that I'm really interested to learn in, and I would love to pick your brain. That's really where I would start. And then of course, align yourselves to roles that are interesting to you and eventually get all the work experience that you want and become a subject matter expert of your own.
If I can just add one thing, because I think Heidi made a really good point about coffee chats. There's verbiage within sales. You have your hot leads; those are the people you know really well. You have your cold leads; those are people you do not know at all, and you have your warm leads. Do not ignore the power of your alma mater. I get calls all the time from people that say, I see that you went to Western, I'm graduating and whatever. And I do try to carve out time for anybody that reaches out. But if I'm going to prioritize, I'm going to prioritize the person that took the time to actually see what I'm about, even just one line, and create a little bit of care there. And B, there is that instant connection when you have some commonality. So if the idea of reaching out 100% cold is like, I would love to be able to do that, I'm just so not there yet. Explore your warm network, ask for referrals, look at your alma mater, look at people that are maybe associated within similar groups or clubs or whatever have you. But I could not agree more. But I remember sitting on the kind of other side of that, and people would say that they're like, yeah, that sounds great. That is just not something I feel comfortable doing yet. And which is totally fine. So if you're looking for good stepping blocks, those are good strategies to get yourself started.
And one strategy I will say, Sam, before you take it back, this is like, I've preached this to every single person I've met, but if all of you in this Zoom right now take one thing away from what Sheila and I are saying, never send a LinkedIn invite without a message attached to it. It is probably every working person's biggest pet peeve. Add something to it. Like Sheila said, personalize your message. Even just say, hey, I see your role title. You work in an industry that's very interesting to me. I'd love to connect to learn more from what you're sharing. Or if it's something more personal, like, hey, I go to your alma mater. I would love to learn from what you're doing or how your organization is tackling X problem. It's really, really straightforward. It takes 2 seconds, and the rate that you probably will get accepted by the person you're sending the invite to shoots up like 100%. So that's always something that I would say. And it forced me to get out of my comfort zone when I was early in networking and in university. So yeah, never send a LinkedIn invite without a message attached.
That's definitely a really powerful point. And Sheila, just to pick on you a little bit, if you don't mind, if for those of you that don't know, Queens and Western have a pretty huge rivalry. So Sheila, if I sent you a LinkedIn invite, right, and I had a message attached to it and said, "Hey, I'm from Queens," would you still accept my connection request?
100%. 100%. No, it's so interesting because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but being in the industry I'm in, I connect with students from post-secondary institutions literally across the country, and Queens is one that I admire a lot. I love the students that finish at Queens, and sometimes people are like, "Oh, I'm a little nervous to talk to you." I'm like, I don't care. Like, you're talented. I'm so excited to be chatting with you. Yeah, no, 100. Talent is talent.
Awesome. Thank you. I was just messing around, but awesome. So thank you for those for answering all my questions, guys. It was amazing. I'm just gonna open the floor up really quick to any questions that the members would like to ask. Once again, thank you, Sheila and Heidi. That was super, super amazing. Yeah, we couldn't have had this much fun about sales and asking questions if it weren't for you guys. So thank you so much for kicking it off. Yeah, and if anyone wants to ask any questions, just feel free to unmute your mic or just put something in the chat and we can answer them.
Please don't be shy. Asking good questions is literally the cornerstone of this conversation.
Yeah.
So.
And don't be afraid if you don't think your question is great. It's probably still rooted in kind of an awesome curiosity, which we'd love to answer.
Ooh, we got one. Would you say where you go to university would have a big impact on opportunities in your networks? If you don't mind, I'd like to field this one.
Yeah, of course.
So coming from a recruitment background, what I do find is the question is more, does this person have a degree? Then where did they go to school? You may have some preferential treatment if maybe the hiring manager came from a certain alma mater, or maybe they had a lot of luck hiring out of one school. But for the most part, I've found that it's more of a, does this person have the bare minimum credential? And then what is much more important is seeing opportunities like this on your resume, right? So I wouldn't bear too much concern with that particular question. Heidi, do you disagree?
No, I totally agree. Like, okay. McMaster isn't necessarily known for its business program. It wasn't like, I guess in business is really like where I can comment from. A lot of students especially get really worried about going to the best school with the best alumni networks. Like, of course, in some cases, some companies recruit from different schools, and it might be advantageous to get like invitations to certain, networking events. But I think more often than not, like, if you're a well-rounded student, you learn what you're really passionate about, you're involved in different extracurriculars, and you have like a resume that shows what you've learned and how you've applied it in your education, it really does not matter where you go, whether it's a university, college, any sort of diploma, anything. As long as you're learning and you have the right intentions behind what you're looking to accomplish, I don't think it matters at all. I used to stress about the same thing when I was, in high school, and it didn't really matter. Yeah. I can look at the second question. When did you guys start reaching out to new people on LinkedIn by asking them for advice? I started, I think, as soon as first or second year. I remember going on like a couple networking lunches in my second year just to learn. But it depends. Like if you're ready to, oh, actually, no, maybe even high school, but truly, if you see somebody, especially on LinkedIn, with how easy it is these days, everybody being home and ready to connect virtually all the time. Like if you're right now in high school and you see somebody that has like a director or VP title in an industry you want to work in, you don't even have to be worried about messaging them now. There's truly like no minimum age. It's just what you want to learn. If you have an interesting approach, if you personalize your message to reaching out to that person so they know why them and why it's valuable for them to accept, yeah, then by all means reach out. Do you disagree, Sheila?
I was far less keen. I got to, fourth year university and went, what the heck am I going to do after I graduate? Luckily enough, I worked at the Career Center and my boss recommended that I reach out for informational interviews. So that was my first deep dive into it. I learned really quickly that successful people love talking about themselves. So do not be shy to reach out and say, you've had such a decorated career and I would love to grab 5 to 10 minutes. People love it. Yeah. So that was actually what landed my first job. One strategy that I used during my job prospecting thing, and I did treat finding my next job as a sales process 100%. I had a list of companies. I had who are my warm leads, what is the industry, where does this rank? So I was really targeted with it. But what I did with some of the more colder leads was I filmed a video of myself introducing, this is who I am. This is why I'm specifically reaching out to you. Here's what I think I can bring to the table. Would love 30 minutes of your time to determine if this would be a good fit. Literally 2 minutes. And the platform I used is it's free. It's called Vidyard. And there's like tons out there, but Vidyard is my personal fave. So I did not start as early, but I think that once you kind of get the knack of it a couple of times, you'll be surprised how easy you find it and how second nature it just becomes.
Yeah, Vidyard's awesome. I don't know if Sheila, if you joined the Sales Success Summit this year, but some of their sessions with Scott Ingram and even with what they do with Gong have been so cool to watch.
Yeah, it's a terrifying platform to try first, but I used it a lot with my sales prospecting, specifically with my warm leads, because if somebody wasn't responding and they saw my face, they felt so guilty.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then respond.
Yeah, that's a lot more accountability when your face is attached.
100%. We have another question. Thank you for the great stuff. One question: if you're pitching your product or even service to a potential customer, would you have a regular spiel of text or would you each pitch be personalized? Heidi, why don't you take this one first?
Sure. I think I come from the perspective of like having an agenda and a template of like how I want to structure my conversation. So I always know that I want to start off a conversation by kind of having what's called a UFC or like an upfront contract or like a time-based agenda, which is like an agreement of what you both want to accomplish. Then I know I want to go into questions, learning about, what the problem is, and then leveraging, the solution that you offer. I think I never speak off of a script or a spiel or anything like that, because I think it can come across insincere. But I think when you get more comfortable, that's not to say it's a bad thing to do. If you have a really, really good like go-to spiel that hits all the right points, awesome, use it. But I think what's more important is to know exactly what you do well and then how to cater that to what your prospects talking about. If you go back to like something I mentioned earlier, which is where if you know your solution does XYZ correctly, but your customer has problems with ABC, why would you give them the spiel, right? Your solution might only really need to address one of the problems they're having. So yeah, the answer I'd probably take to that is be more personalized. It doesn't mean you have to change your entire value prop with every customer you talk to, but it means knowing what you do really well, what value you offer to the customer. And then based on, what you listen to and what you're hearing from them, you cater, like you specialize your solution to them specifically because you want it to resonate with the people you talk to.
I typically have templates that are, I'm going to say 70% baked with my meat of what I'm talking about. But oftentimes that's under the assumption that somebody's going to bite the second that you get in touch with them once. So on average, it takes about 7 times for somebody to get in touch with you after you've been prospecting them. So
Yeah.
diversifying your content is really powerful. Send over an introductory message. Maybe your second message is a video. That third message is a LinkedIn. That fourth message is, I've tried to get in touch with you. You may not be the right person. Do you have a recommendation? And that fifth one is a breakup message. Clearly not the right time. I'm going to circle back in 3 months. If I'm wrong, you let me know. So that's kind of that prospecting bucket. But again, those are kind of your 70% baked, and then you personalize so that it actually looks like you're not just sending mass emails, because those are incredibly easy to ignore. And then, you know, after you've actually had that call, I have this infamous saying on my team: if it's not in writing, it did not happen. So if you're having conversations with customers about what you can deliver and that ain't in writing, you're inviting so much he said, she said that is just so avoidable. So sending a really thoughtful follow-up email to say, this is what we discussed, this is the next steps, this is what we need, and making sure that you're getting ready for that project planning of actually getting, because it's so much about sales is being planful.
Oh my God, the art of the follow-up email is huge. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you mentioned it. Okay, our next question is, why did you guys decide to go into sales in the first place? Sheila, do you want to take this one? I guess it's more of an indirect kind of rule from the recruitment side, but.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I went to school. I had no idea what I wanted to, you know, be when I grew up. As I mentioned, I worked in the career center in my 4th year of university, and my boss recommended that I look at this recruitment job at Western. I got that job through booking an informational interview, and yay. I did it for a couple of years, and then when I was ready to move back to Toronto, I actually did one of those Myers-Briggs assessments of, you know, what should I be? And sales was number 1 on that list. And the first instinct I had was, I don't want to work retail. And after doing a little bit more research, I realized I'm like, sales may actually have a bit of a professional lens that I may not even know about. And that's when I booked a informational interview with Sales Talent Agency, who ended up hiring me. And then I worked there for 7 years. So I think sales is a really misinterpreted occupation. And I'm not saying that sales within every organization is going to be really great. As a salesperson, you have to ask really important questions throughout that interview process as well. What is my target? What's the likelihood that I'm going to hit my target? What's the average deal size? Am I working with new customers? Am I working with existing customers? There's a lot of really, a lot of due diligence that's needed to determine, okay, what sales role is not just going to be right for me, but right for me when I'm learning. Because I'm telling you right now, and Heidi can attest to this, you're going to have some wins. You're going to have a lot of really hard times. So it's brutal. Like it's so worth it, but it's brutal. So having an environment that's going to be conducive to that is incredibly important. But I, like a lot of people, fell into sales and realized that, oh, wow, this is actually a lot of fun. And in my previous jobs, I always had to go into my annual reviews, like, how am I doing? And with sales, I'm like, I know I'm killing it. Like, look at the numbers, look at me. So it's a great career to kind of validate that you're doing really well, but you should absolutely prepare to have a tough ramp up period, a lot of learning, but if it's the career for you, it will be worth it. I assure you. And sales is not for everybody. That is not what I'm suggesting on this call, but if it's right for you, even if you're perfect for it, it's going to be tough, and prepare for that.
It's so funny. I was going to start with sales is not for everybody. I also fell into sales very accidentally. So my long-term career goal is to practice law in the software space. So I was working at BMO Wealth Management, like I said, and I decided, obviously, like, big bank career life was not, you know, what was ultimately really thriving. It wasn't really fulfilling because the culture of the bank wasn't, you know, where I knew I would thrive. So I connected with the founder of my previous company over LinkedIn. It was again, prime example of sliding in the DMs, but in the right way, in the professional context, you know. And it worked out really well. Again, I didn't necessarily seek out sales for the role itself, because, of course, like I said earlier, I had like a preconceived notion of what the role was. But I think I had like 3 central goals. I knew I wanted, one, to have mentoring and coaching as a big focus for the role. I wanted personal development and challenge, and I wanted to have impact in an organization or in an industry. So those are the three questions I ask myself. So whether you guys are considering sales or something else, especially as students, even before you think about the job you want to try, I would probably think about what you want to accomplish or what you want to learn in that space, and then try and figure out what job fits those criteria and go about it that way. So yeah, both of us didn't have a direct road to sales, but we're glad.
But very people.
Yeah,
people
almost
do.
like 2% of people, I think, in sales will tell you that they sought this career out because it's not something that's really even taught in school, right? So
No.
Mhm.
It falls within marketing for whatever reason. Like, no, it's
yeah,
not marketing. It's
so
something completely different. So there is a lot of just misinformation on it. So, and with that, if you don't ask, you don't know. Another centerpiece to this conversation. So we've got a couple more questions here.
Yeah, I think we have time for just one more. So I think that is the last question too. How might you find the power, personal, and knowledge to develop into a bold and perhaps unexplored idea?
Ooh, I don't know what you mean by this, Lawrence. I'm trying to think. I guess Sheila, I don't know if I have the right understanding, but I guess it's like, how do you get the right people, all the variables together to like execute an idea? Is that what you were thinking as well?
Okay.
I don't know if that's the, let's assume that's okay. Perfect.
Yeah, he said it is.
Sweet. Thank you, Lawrence. I guess it would be like create as many relationships as you can and learn from people. If we, go back to, what we were saying, ask really good questions, ask all the questions that you can, learn about the space that you're trying to execute an idea in and what actually is happening here, have a lot of conversations with customers, with competitors in that landscape to learn where you would come in, and then develop a strategy that, helps you stand out, understand your business model or your idea and how you would execute it, but also just get the right group of people together to make it happen. So there's a number of different ways to approach it, but I would probably just say like start building relationships first and learn what works. I don't know if Sheila, do you probably have more to add to that than I do?
Well, I'm reflecting on the path may not have been walked before. I'm reflecting a little bit at Lawrence. I really hope that this answers your question, but I'm going to speak a little bit to my experience. So the Great Canadian Sales Competition at my old job, nothing of its type, it existed across the country. There were a multitude of competitions that existed, associations, but there was nothing focused with students in sales. The first step was, is this a problem worth solving? So connecting with a lot of our clients who were saying, we're having a really hard time attracting junior talent. And when we were talking to students were saying, I don't want to work sales. Sales is in retail, i.e. me. So we knew that we had this gap. So that's step one is, okay, we've got an actual opportunity here. Step two is recognizing that you're not going to build the mountain in one day, and be very okay with that. And so what we ended up doing with the competition was, the first year I did it myself, proved a concept. The second year I hired student ambassadors across the entire country to represent the competition on campus and get some guerrilla marketing involved. That third step was, okay, now that we have the students involved, let's get the students to get us in touch with their professors. So then we had all of these administrators on our side. Then once we had the administrators on our side, we're like, okay, now can we use those administrators to get to the deans and the big kahuna people to make it required? So I think one of the things that I see a lot of times in things that may not go, and I'm not saying that it was perfect, like there were a lot of things that went wrong, but I think recognizing that there's going to be various stages, managing your expectations for each stage, holding you and whoever is working with you to be accountable to each of their roles within that, and being okay to pivot. A lot of times you kind of get married to this one idea, and then halfway through you're like, ugh, this is wrong. And having the agility to switch really quickly is incredibly powerful. But I think when you're talking about, is the path may not have been walked before, why hasn't anyone walked it? That is a really critical question. Are you the person that recognizes that there's a problem and nobody else has? In which case, how the heck do you get started? But there may also be some underlining reasons as to why nobody's walked that, and you can't really get to that without asking those important questions. So, put it out into 2 stages, prove your concept, and then be really thoughtful about that project planning.
Yeah, that was phenomenal. Thank you both so much once again. And thank you everyone for your questions. They're really good questions to ask. But yeah, awesome. So just to wrap things up now, Sheila and Heidi, thank you so much for dedicating your time. It was a wonderful session. I definitely had a lot of fun asking you all those questions. I'm sure other people got a good practice in asking questions as well. We hope to have you guys back here once again sometime in the future. But this was definitely very invaluable and a really good kickoff to what this challenge is going to look like for the next couple of weeks.
We wish you
guys
all the best in all of your upcoming challenges. Thank you so much for having us. And keep in mind, we are 2 people with unique experiences answering your questions, but continue to ask even the same questions to multitudes of people to help round out your perspectives. I love this organization. I love the students that dedicate time to this organization, especially with all the competing priorities you have. So you're already a step ahead in dedicating the time and trying to develop your business acumen in real life scenarios outside of the classroom. So I commend all of you for being here.
Absolutely. And likewise, it's been a pleasure to join everybody that asked questions. Thank you so much for contributing. And you guys can always reach us on LinkedIn or email us directly if you have any questions, have any conversations you want to, dig a little deeper or have us just listen to what's going on with you guys. Happy to help. I'm sure Sheila will echo that, but
I am the only Sheila at Crowdmark. I'm very easy to find. So connect with me on LinkedIn and my email is sheila@crowdmark.com. So I could not make it easier for you guys to get in touch.
And likewise, mine is heidi@detonategroup.com. So yeah, really easy. Reach out to us if you guys have questions.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you so much, Sheila and Heidi. Hope to have you guys sometime soon.
Yeah.
Anyways, awesome. Take care, guys. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, all.
Brilliant. And for just the last few people here, just quickly, I will. We're out of time right now, but I'll open the case or challenge 3 signups momentarily, and then I'll send you guys a link on Discord, as well as the project 3 expectations, so you guys have a good understanding of what to expect. It's a pretty simple presentation, so it shouldn't be too hard. But yeah. Anyways, thank you guys for coming out, and hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys next week. Take care, guys.
All right. See you then.
See ya.
See you, everyone.
Cool. See